happens to it. And if they already knew, if they already had a preset plan for us, they would be bored in a mere 100,000 years.
Right, right.
So they're watching. Usually they watch, but something happened in our story of our cosmology. And I hope I can give the total rendition of this in the next 8 or 10 minutes, and then we can go on and you can ask me questions, and we can go on from there.
Okay, good.
Good so far?
Yes.
So, what happened was that one of these aeons, or generators as I call them, whose name was Sophia, which means wisdom, became, we could say, obsessed with this human experiment, which is called the anthropos, the human template, genomic template. And she became enamored of this new species that the gods had engineered in their minds and had implanted in some molecular biological spores. And she started to dream or fantasize, you could say. She had her own idea. The gods knew that there were many ways in which this human strain of creature could unfold and develop. But Sophia loved this creature very deeply, and she was fascinated by its qualities and its properties that had been engineered in it from the beginning. These include very high intelligence to learn and to innovate and to explore novelty. Dianoia, the capacity to communicate and learn, that is the ability to create complex symbolic and communication systems. Metanoia is another quality that was endowed in the anthropos. That's the quality to develop paradigms, complete paradigms which describe nature or the human mind, and then work through these paradigms and evolve to more and more advanced and sophisticated paradigms, not to be stuck in a single paradigm. And the capacity, especially of epinoia, that is of imagination, and the power of enoia, or intention. So all these faculties, which we know to be present in a very high degree in the human species, were engineered into us by the divine beings. And Sophia loved to think about and dream about what would happen as we began to develop our innate skills.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to the edge of the galactic core, you could say. She kind of put her nose to the glass of the observation booth. And she's looking out from the galactic center. And all the other gods have withdrawn, so she's there alone. Now, she didn't engineer the human species alone. She engineered the human species with a number of other aeons, particularly one other one, whose name was Thelete. And so the engineering of the human species was kind of a group or team effort by the aeons. But Sophia became separated from the rest of them by her fascination with what would happen. And the myth then tells us something really incredible. You need to have a certain empathy for the divine beings to take this piece of the story on board. It tells us that Sophia was so fascinated by the world that she projected for humanity to unfold that she actually was drawn away from the galactic core. She was pulled out of the galactic core by her own desire and fascination, and she plunged into the region of the spiral arms of the galaxy. Now, aeons normally don't do that. That is not their realm. And so this was an anomalous event, and you might envision it as a power spike from the galactic core, a massive plume of plasma luminosity spiked out of the galactic core into the region of the limbs. And this was the fall of the goddess Sophia in mythological terms. Is that clear so far?
Yes. It's similar to perhaps a spike that comes from the sun, a solar flare.
Exactly. And we know what solar flares are. And in addition, some years ago, scientists did discover these tunnel-like structures or filament-like structures that proceed laterally from the galactic core out into the limbs of the galaxy, just like solar flares proceed laterally from the body of the sun. And so this is scientific information that somewhat confirms the possibility that such a thing could happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when this happened, which was first of all unexpected, immediately a chain of unanticipated events took place, because normally such a spike would not occur. Likewise, if there was a massive coronal emission that hit the Earth, a chain of unexpected events would probably take place, you know. What happened essentially was two things. First, the pure spike or plume of plasmic energy impacted the matter that is floating in the galactic arms. And that matter is a form of a lower order of material substances. What's at the core of the galaxy is absolutely immaterial, pure light, luminosity, living intelligence, and sentience. But the material in the limbs of the galaxy is more like a lower order of matter that can be shaped into different worlds. And so it consists of the primary elementary particles and things like that. And it's a sea of what the Gnostics called shadow matter, whereas at the core there is no shadow whatsoever. It is pure luminosity. And so Sophia's plume impacted this sea of shadow matter, and she herself created a huge splash, as it were, when she arrived out there, and she produced what you might consider to be a fracture zone in that area of matter. And as a result of that impact, something really bizarre occurred, which is that a species actually arose. A species was spontaneously created in matter by the impact of her plasma energy. And this species is called the archons. And they're called that because it comes from the word archai, which means from the beginning or first. And these archon entities, which are cyborg-like ETs of an inorganic nature, they are inorganic beings, arose directly and swirled around in this region, and they didn't even have a habitat to live in. I know this is a very difficult thing to conceive, but I have pointed out recently that around 1850, a British scientist named Andrew Crook performed an experiment that produced exactly this result. And Michael Faraday, the famous British scientist who was working with electricity in the early days, repeated this same experiment. It's called the abiogenesis of the Acari insects, A-C-A-R-I, Acari insects, which are like mites. And these experiments showed that these insects can be produced by the impact of an electrical field on certain very fine powders.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. So there is, again, some scientific proof. I'm not going to go through this whole scenario citing the scientific correlations to Sophia myth. I'll just point out to those who are wanting to investigate them that they are many.
Right.
So now let's proceed further, and we can bring it down to our own situation here quite quickly. I would like to do that.
Yes.
Sophia was shocked by the appearance of these entities, which you might imagine to be a great swarm of locusts. They are like locusts or cockroach entities. They're inorganic, but they had, in a way, a human form. But that human form was the form of an aborted fetus or a premature human form. That is to say, very large head and spindly limbs. So you have your typical profile of the gray ET. And so this colony of locusts, ETs, was flying around, and Sophia had to deal with them. And she had no idea what to do at first because she was in an alien environment. Gods of her nature did not normally, let us say, descend into the realms of matter in the manner in which she had done. At the same time, she was still remembered why she got there in the first place. She was obsessed with a world, a planetary system in which humanity could emerge, and she wanted to see what it would do. But her idea of that system was that it would only have 3 bodies. It would have a sun, a central sun, a planet rotating the sun, and a moon rotating the planet. That's all she wanted for the human species. That's the kind of world system she herself had envisioned. Such world systems probably do exist somewhere among the many planetary systems in the universe. And so she had to, but these Archon beings were getting in her way. So before she could begin to fashion this world system that would be the habitat for humanity, she had to give them an environment. And so although they are a mimic species, they cannot create anything out of their own initiative. And although they do not have any of the fabulous capacities that were engineered in the human species, she allowed them to have a fragment of her divine intelligence, to borrow it or use it. Now, they immediately took it as if it were their own. They thought it was their own. And in fact, one particular entity who was a kind of dominant entity in this hive is called the Lord Archon. And he assumed a kind of reptilian form. And he was the leader of the pack, as it were. And when Sophia gave the Archons the ability to create their own world, she showed them how to do it as well by imitating the fractal patterns that were at the center of the galaxy. They created a solar system, a realm of celestial mechanics, of planets, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, and so forth. The trick is, however, that the planetary system created by the Archons was not alive. It was composed of inorganic matter, inorganic planets, and life was not possible on these planets, especially not the life of the human entity, which needed a different kind of environment. And so what then happened was, over a long period of time, Sophia realized that she had to create the proper environment in which humanity could live, that it could not live in the same environment with this inorganic species. They had their own world. They had what is the prototype of the solar system today. In fact, Gnostics taught that they do inhabit the solar system, but they do not inhabit the Earth. It was not made for the purpose of supporting their kind of life form. So facing this situation, Sophia found out that she had to take very extreme measures. And this brings us down to the creation of the Earth on which we live today. She herself metamorphosed her own cosmic galactic forces into the planet Earth. She manifested the planet Earth in its original form from her own energies, and it was a transmutation of her own plasmatic luminosity. So the Earth was created in this manner from the body of the goddess, but the other planets in the solar system were not. Nevertheless, this structure of the solar system that arose as a habitat for the Archons was very powerful in its own way. It was like, imagine being on a carnival ride, one of those rides like on the octopus or on a Ferris wheel. When you're riding on a Ferris wheel or you're in one of those cars of the octopus with the arms that are swinging out and around, tremendous forces are generated that throw you around. They throw you against the side of the thing that you're riding in. Well, likewise with a planetary system of celestial mechanics, there were tremendous forces generated by that, and Sophia found, much to her dismay and to her surprise, that the planet that she was forming of her own body was captured in the Archon planetary system. And that is the situation today that we face. We live on a planet that is alive. It's a superorganism. And as a matter of fact, the Gnostics taught that we can actually communicate directly